Eileen Gu hits back at vice president's comments on her national choice. Eileen Gu, a San Francisco-born skier competing for China, has fiercely responded to criticism from U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and others who questioned her decision not to represent the United States at the 2026 Winter Olympic Games in Milano Cortina. The comments have sparked broader debate about nationality, identity, and the role of politics in sports as Gu continues her historic Olympic run with 2 silver medals and another medal possible. What J.D. Vance said. During media appearances at the Games, J.D. Vance implied that American-born athletes who have benefited from our education system, freedoms and liberties should consider competing for the United States rather than other countries. His remarks referenced Gu's choice. She was born and raised in California, trained extensively in the U.S., and attended Stanford University, yet opted to represent China, her mother's homeland, in international competition. While Vance stopped short of demanding any policy changes, he expressed that he would root for American athletes who identify as U.S. representatives. Gu's response to the criticism. Gu did not shy away from the question when asked by reporters about Vance's comments and the broader backlash. She greeted Vance's criticism with a light-hearted, "I'm flattered. Thanks, J.D. That's sweet," before articulating her perspective. Gu said she feels like a bit of a punching bag for what she described as politically motivated criticism tied to anti-China sentiment, not her personal choices. She pointed out that many athletes compete for nations other than where they were born and said the focus on her decision seems amplified because of her success and because China is often viewed negatively by some critics. Broader backlash and personal toll. Gu's comments have drawn reactions well beyond political circles. Critics on social media and media personalities have labeled her choice a betrayal or framed it as unpatriotic, while defenders argue that athletes should have the freedom to choose who they represent. The debate has even spilled over into personal security concerns. Gu has publicly described feeling targeted by some critics over her decision, including threats and confrontations, which she says are rooted in cultural and political tensions rather than sporting decisions. Amid the controversy, Gu has maintained her focus on competition and using her platform to inspire young athletes globally. Debate snapshot. Position. Argument. Focus. Critics. Athletes should represent birthplace. National identity. Supporters. Freedom of choice for athletes. Personal agency. Gu's stance. Criticism is politically motivated. Sportsmanship and heritage. Vance's view. Support U.S. athletes. Patriotism. Public reaction. Mixed opinions. Nationalism versus global sport. Eileen Gu's response to J.D. Vance's remarks highlights the complex intersection between sports, nationality, and politics. While critics emphasize patriotism and birthplace, Gu argues that her decision reflects personal heritage and a genuine desire to inspire a wider audience, particularly in China, where skiing has fewer role models. As she competes at the highest level in freestyle skiing, Gu's reaction underscores the broader conversation about how athletes navigate identity and public expectation on the global stage. When Eileen Gu launches into the air, gravity loosens its grip, not just on her skis, but on identity itself. Suspended between sky and snow, she exists in a realm that defies borders, a space where nationality blurs into motion and motion becomes art. Yet on the ground, where flags wave and politics linger like thin mountain air, identity is often forced into sharper lines. Recently, those lines were redrawn in public discourse after a U.S. vice president commented critically on Gu's decision to compete for China instead of the United States. The remarks reignited a familiar debate about loyalty, belonging, and what it means to represent a nation in an age when people, cultures, and ambitions cross borders more fluidly than ever before. But Eileen Gu has never seemed particularly interested in staying within prescribed boundaries. The weight of a flag. For most athletes, the flag stitched onto a uniform is a symbol of pride. For Gu, it became a symbol others tried to define for her. Born in San Francisco to a Chinese mother and an American father, Gu grew up straddling cultures with ease. Mandarin at home. English at school. Summers in Beijing. Winters on American slopes. She did not see contradiction in this duality, she saw expansion. Her decision in 2019 to represent China in international competitions shocked some Americans who had celebrated her as a rising star in U.S. freestyle skiing. For critics, it felt like a loss. For supporters in China, it was a moment of triumph. For Gu, it was personal. In interviews, she has often described her choice not as a rejection of one identity, but as an embrace of another. She wanted to inspire young girls in China, where winter sports were still growing. She wanted to honor her mother's heritage. She wanted, quite simply, to be herself. But public life rarely allows simplicity. The comment that sparked the flame. When the vice president recently questioned Gu's national choice, the words carried more than political weight, they carried implication. They suggested that choosing to represent China was somehow a turning away from the United States. They framed her decision within a broader geopolitical tension between two superpowers. Suddenly, Gu was no longer just an athlete carving perfect lines into powder. She was a symbol of globalization, of cultural complexity, of shifting power dynamics. Yet Gu's response was neither defensive nor inflammatory. It was measured, confident, and unmistakably self-assured. She reminded critics that identity is not a zero-sum game. That pride in one heritage does not necessitate shame in another. That the world young people inhabit today is interconnected in ways previous generations could scarcely imagine. "I'm not choosing between two worlds," she said in essence. "I belong to both." It was less a rebuttal than a reframing. Generation without borders. To understand Gu's stance is to understand her generation. Gen Z has grown up on international group chats, multilingual TikTok feeds, and flights that collapse continents in 2 hours. They see culture as something fluid and remixable. They collaborate across oceans without second thought. For them, dual identity is not confusion, it is currency. Gu embodies this global mindset. She studies at Stanford. She models for luxury brands in Paris and Shanghai. She trains on slopes from Colorado to Beijing. Her social media presence flows seamlessly between English and Mandarin. When critics attempt to box her into a single national narrative, they are applying an old framework to a new reality. In hitting back at the vice president's comments, Gu did not attack patriotism. She challenged its exclusivity. Patriotism, in her interpretation, is not a narrow allegiance but a bridge, a way of honoring roots while reaching outward. The politics of athletic choice. Athletes have long been entangled in politics, whether they intend to be or not.